Okay, we are live. And this is good. This is good. Welcome to the Stir Crazy Podcast. I'm your host, JP Reynolds. And it's been a week, y'all. It's been a week. It's been a week. It's been a week. On the Stir Crazy Podcast, I'm talking to some really dynamic, really dope individuals, really about our transitioning world and what's going on and maybe what should be going on. And I'm excited to have this special guest today. Super great energy because it's been a week. You know, we've had a return to some degree to normalcy. It feels like, right? Like the pandemic, it feels like we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. We've had more vaccinations, but with this return to normalcy, we're also getting more publicized, highly publicized, mass shooting notifications and violent interactions with police, with unarmed citizens, right? I'm gonna say the names: Dante Wright and Alex Toledo. The latest we've seen this past week, we've had Army veterans, Black Army veterans getting violently accosted by police officers, and then, ironically, other Army veterans assaulting Black folks in the neighborhood just taking a walk. So it's been a week, and I'm excited to talk to my guest today because this is a person who has a really great track record of, honestly, like thinking creatively and innovatively about solutions, right? Solutions to a lot of the ills that we're facing and figuring out ways that folks in different fields can make impact and make change. So I'm excited to talk to this person. Now, let me be clear, right? Like we're not coming up with no solutions to the world's ills of this podcast episode or this conversation, but it's important to be creatively thinking in that direction. And I'm really excited for the guest that I have today. Her name is Keisha Senter. And again, I'm excited to have this conversation. Keisha, in addition to doing a lot of other things, is currently the director of social impact at Monkeypaw Productions. And, she's done work in politics and entrepreneurship and philanthropy and entertainment now too. So I'm excited to have this conversation, especially given our context. So Keisha, welcome. Thank you for pulling up.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Yeah, not for sure. And I know, it's been a week for all of us. I know personally,
Mhm.
professionally, all these types of things. So let me just check in with you. Where are you? How are you? Have you been drinking water? What's good?
Chow, chow, chow. I got my water right here as we speak. I got my diffuser going in the background, my incense and my candle, just trying to find a place to center ourselves after this week. It kept hitting us nonstop, nonstop, nonstop. Externally in the world and personally as well. So I'm just happy to be here and just thankful to be sharing this space where maybe we can, exhale and just talk about some things with each other. Love
Yeah.
on each other.
Yeah, we need that. We need that energy, that loving on each other energy, that exhaling energy. Yeah, we need it. We do need it. So thank you again. I'm glad we can hold that space and provide that space
Mhm,
with the
mhm.
conversation. So, you're in multiple spaces. You're a solutions thinker, solutions oriented. It's been a crazy week, as we've acknowledged, and it's been a crazy year, of course.
Mhm.
So I kind of want to start off with just asking you, with all that has transpired over the last week, the last year, where do you think we are? Because there's been shifts, there's been major seismic shifts, it feels like, over the past year, socially, culturally, politically, even. So where do you think we are in terms of how are we doing? What's your evaluation on where
Yeah.
we are in terms of all of the stuff that's happening?
You know, I I have been spending a lot of time on this. I think we're in a moment and like this moment is continuing. And so one thing that I think that we are seeing is that light is being shined. And no, I don't think you're going to be able to be in the dark about whether it's racism or brutality or um, hidden racism. I just don't necessarily know if that is going to be able to continue in the forms that we have seen it before because I mean, we are seeing people. take to the streets. We are seeing people speak up and video surfacing, and then also some space and power for people individually feel the need to be able to shine a light on things that are unjust, that are wrong. And also, as a collective and as businesses and corporations, we are starting to see. I mean, look what's happening across with civics as it relates to the Jim Crow laws that Georgia is being able to that is trying to enact. And as we're seeing corporations speak up and talk about, let's have a conversation about this. Let's talk about what we can't do and suppressing and calling it suppressing the Black vote. And so I think this is a moment. Now, my company before where I am now is called the Solution Center. And so I tend to think that, I want to bring solutions to the table. I feel like so much has happened in the last week that I had to take a pause, and I was like, I don't know if I have the answer of what exactly we should be doing, right? What's going to be the answer, and how we're going to drive change, because it seems so to be so much every time you turn the table. Um, we were watching the trial of our brother George Floyd, right? And there was a part of where you're seeing people, you're seeing some of the police officers testify that this was wrong. It was that moment of where, and I read a really good article by a sister, Carmen Perez. Are we seeing this blue wall crumble just a little bit? Like, is that where we're heading? And then the next day, Dante Wright, not within that week, that happened. And then Adam Toledo, and then we saw the veterans, as you said. So as soon as I think that we might be headed to a conversation, we get hit with another blow or another hook. Help me. No, I'm not going to get my analogy right with boxing, but we get hit with a hook, and it's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew. It is exhausting. A lot of us are oriented towards figuring out the solution. And that doesn't seem fair, really, because we're living this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's not just like a problem over there or an issue over here. We're actually living this. So
Mm-hmm.
for folks like you who are in the field, who are doing this work, like you said, it's time. We need some time to read, some time to reflect and woosah, and maybe take a step back, right? Because that's a part of the work, but also it's part of living, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the light
Yeah.
shining that you're talking about is so important, and that's also exhausting work, to be a light shiner and to constantly respond to the call of being a truth teller or being a change agent or being any of the things that are under the umbrella of being a light shiner. So I hear you on that, for real. It's definitely exhausting. I want to ask you about what got you into being a light shiner, because a lot of times what is helpful, at least for me, and I know from folks I've talked to, sometimes what's helpful, in addition to breathing and taking a step back and saying, actually, I'm not going to work on that right now. I'm gonna just take care of myself mentally and spiritually and all of that. Sometimes it's helpful to think about the why, the original why, right? The original purpose for why we got into things, why we started things. So I am curious, right? For you, what
Mm-hmm.
got you into this space? What inspired you to be a light shiner in this way? And I know that there's been some shifts and some, pivots, but what you do is super interesting. And I'm curious as to the why, or like the origin, or what, how you found yourself doing impact impact work.
I think that it starts back from a place of always wanting to try to figure out how to give back. And so that came from my childhood of when I was a kid. I wanted to be an obstetrician gynecologist. And I loved babies when I was a young person, probably like most little young girls did. I loved being around babies and things of that sort. And so I thought, and I wanted to deliver babies. And, I'm in entertainment now, and this is one reason why I do believe that the images that we see are important to us. I grew up watching the Cosby Show, and it's a whole conversation of where we are right now with Bill Cosby and the things that have happened. But Heathcliff, Huxtable, and Claire Huxtable were, and Rudy was my sister. Like, these were people that we were all a family. I was part of that family, and I loved him being a doctor. And so much of why I wanted to be a doctor was because of the Cosby Show, and I was good in science. I was really, really good in science, but I grew up in a really small town in Kentucky, and my mom was a teacher, my dad was a Vietnam vet and a postman, and then, the women in my world were teachers as well. So everyone had this sense of helping and giving back, and I thought that I'd do it through science and through medicine. And I was serious. I had internships, I was writing pamphlets, I was doing oncology internships all the way until I got to Washington, D.C., for an internship during college. And I went to Florida A&M University and Tallahassee, Florida one time for all my rattlers who might be listening.
Yeah.
But, during college, I ended up going to an internship in Washington, D.C., and a lot of my friends that summer were on the Hill and they were working in politics, and I was at EPA. And I just fell in love with Washington, D.C., and I decided that I was going to be in politics. I had one semester left from college. So my mom was like, "Oh, but you're going to finish this biology pre-med degree." So I finished and did a pivot and decided to get my master's in international relations. I wanted to do something to figure out, how do I make this pivot to be in politics and to be at the center of what felt like, change, of driving change. And I ended up getting a scholarship to Dublin City University in Dublin, Ireland, and I went to Dublin and I moved to Dublin. So it's so interesting to think about this now as me, even more of an adult. I moved to Dublin with a couple of bags and literally nowhere to really live. I had a bed and breakfast that I had for like 2 nights until I found an apartment. I ended up staying in this sweet Irish lady's house for almost 3 weeks, and finally told me I had to go. I moved from the couch to the to, to the bed, whatever. And so she let me stay with her much longer. But I studied international relations, and I I really did feel so passionate about what I was learning from around the world and what was happening in the world, and how important it was for us to have a global mindset. Um, and I'm a little young Black girl from Paducah, Kentucky, and I hadn't thought that big on that scale. So when they were like, "Do you want to go to Ireland?" I was like, "Heck yeah, I've never been. Let's go." And it was really just saying yes, and being a little scared, but deciding, like, what's the step of that fear? Just go, because leap, because what else? There, who knows what's on the other side? But it could be something great. And so studied in international relations and came back to the US and started working with Chuck Schumer. And I got a fantastic opportunity to work with Senator Schumer. And that's where I started my career. I did not know anything about politics that much because I've been studying biochemistry, organic chemistry. I've been doing all of that. So I had to learn all of politics in Ireland, basically, and on the ground with Chuck Schumer, of going from neighborhood and borough to borough. And I just fell in love with what it was that we were doing, like talking to the constituents, or listening to people talk about the problems that they had and how they cared about what their senators were doing. And it was just so many different opportunities that came out of that. And so while I was with Chuck Schumer, one of the key things that we were able to do, Keith Bouchamp, who's a filmmaker, I love Keith, and he was so fantastic. He was working on Untold Story of Emmett Lewis Till documentary, and this was years ago. So I would assume this is probably 2003 or something of that sort. And I just remember that I got tasked with that project for some odd reason, and it was to help Keith bring him in to talk to the senator and Congressman Rangel at that time to talk about how he could use this documentary to help solve and bring justice to this 50-year-old case at that time, right? And I mean, look what happened. We've seen things where Emmett Lewis Till, like that has been on so many conversations, so many parallels to what we have seen from Trayvon Martin to so many of these young men today that we are still dealing with this. But Keith made it his life to tell this story, this man's story, and bring some of those people who were still alive to justice, right? And I got to organize an event around that, learn even more. I knew about Emmett Lewis Till as a child because that's something that my mom just made us know about when I was growing up. And to be a part of that history and to be a part of that history that was trying to shift the future as well was just such an important moment that I realized. And we did a screening, we had Cornell West, we did all this type of stuff, and I think the the light went off of this is impact and this is change. But I didn't have that language. We weren't calling it social impact. I wasn't. I know for a fact maybe there were some studies at where did we Yale. Maybe they
Yeah,
were studying this
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
yeah. But they hadn't really talked about it yet. We found that out. That's where kind of the origin was. But we weren't, that wasn't normal language. We weren't talking about driving social impact. But now that I look back, those are where some of the beginning seeds were planted. And worked on that, then went to the Center for American Progress. And at that time, Center for American Progress now is it's one of the biggest progressive think tanks. But this was right after the '04 election. And I had done some work with the '04 election with Chuck Schumer and John Kerry. And after that, what we saw at the Center for American Progress was that the right was organizing on college campuses and pumping money into college campuses, and the left was just woefully behind. The numbers at that time were just, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars difference of how the left was not investing in college campuses and preparing the next generation of young people to become the you, but giving them tools that they needed on college campuses. So we created Campus Progress at that time, and it was like 5 of us in a little closet and creating what now is it's called Generation Progress, and it was looking at what we see so many young people doing today. How do you arm you with tools, with funding, with relationships, with art to help you understand how you can drive change and how we can empower the next generation? So we saw that, and the Center for American Progress, hats off to them, they saw that we were behind on that, and just in 2004. So that's where and that's impact. We were doing grassroots campaigns. We were helping young people, quite frankly, take to the take to the street on what the issues were. Be it at that time, well, still war. We're still, it was what was happening with in the Middle East. We were looking at college debt and all of those things that were super important during that time, about around 2005, for mobilizing young people. And that was impact. I remember it, so it dates me, but I remember when participant media first started. Now look how great participant media is as a media company. And they came to us that they had just launched like around 2000, 2005, if I'm correct, 2005, 2004. And they came to us like, hey, we're launching participant media, we're gonna use the social impact of the ability of film and art to help drive change and mobilize audiences. So we were like, okay, we're the Center for American Progress. How do we do that? So we started working with them with some of the films that they had, and giving them to college campuses, and let's have conversations around these films. And it's just amazing how what I'm doing now ties back all the way. It ends up coming full circle. But what we saw is, how do we arm audiences and people and constituents with the tools they need to help drive change? And that's listening to that community.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot in there, right? I mean, one thing is that you've been like a lane switcher. It sounds like from the beginning, right? From switching to this biospace to politics, you've come full circle to the art piece and the culture piece, but it's always been in there. And
You know, oh yeah.
it's like always, it sounds like it's just always kind of in there, even with the stuff with politics, right? Like
Mhm.
using art as a tool, or using creative solutions as a tool to campaigning, or figuring out how to even raise money, as you were talking about. I'm curious too, right? Like, because there's so many moments in there. You just went through like that was a really concise, comprehensive view of a really interesting arc. And I'm curious of like what you're, because you also have a willingness to say yes to opportunities, and it sounds like you have this curiosity, and timing is a part of this, and like you said, it's come full circle, and the circle's not complete, right? Like there's still things to come, right?
Hey, who
There's
knows
still
what's
things to
gonna.
come. But I'm curious about like what you've learned from this willingness to say yes, or like what you've learned about the timing piece,
Mm,
especially given this context now, because that sounds like a thing, right? To say I'm gonna just pick up, I'm gonna just go to Dublin, I'm gonna just dip, I'm gonna go out there, and I got a couple bags, I'm gonna just don't know where I'm going. That sounds a little bit crazy, but it also sounds but it also sounds like a willingness to go with the flow and to be present to opportunity in front of you and let that open doors. Like you said at one point, uh, you know, what's on the other side?
mhm.
And that question, what's on the other side of this, is an inspiring question. Could be daunting, but you pair that question with the willingness to say yes, and it's like, all right, nah, we might could get some good stuff out of this.
Yeah,
So what have you learned from that? Because that's interesting.
that's good stuff. I haven't heard. You're hearing you say what I have done, or also what I'm feeling. Like hear it come from someone else is powerful. Um, I do believe there is a willingness to say yes. I have yes written around my house. I have post-it notes around my house
Makes
say
perfect sense to me. Makes
yes.
perfect sense.
And I ask myself, am I saying yes? And I'm human. Even more so, I'm a Virgo, so that means I overanalyze everything. I think about all the steps before I take, but I still go. Even if it's scary, I still pack up and I will go. And I have there's fear associated with that, but I find there is a little bit of adrenaline in that fear, that and that scary part, that if I take that step, and I'm just a woman of faith, I believe it has always happened that if I take that step, I'm going to be okay. Like there's going to be some sort of cushion, and if it's the wrong step, I'm going to learn from it, and there's going to be an opportunity for me to learn, um, if I just go and if I just say yes. And so I mean, that's so interesting that you say that, but literally, I'm looking around my house right now and I'm looking at the post-it notes that say yes. And you never know what can come from that. And I think that that is rooted in believing that there is something that I have to contribute by being there. And so the timing part, it's really hard with the timing, because I do it feels like when you talk about, when you listen to it and when you talk about things, it seems as if that it all just ended up working together, right? It ends up like after this election, then this happened, and then therefore um even as we got to the Center for American Progress, I ended up going working with President Clinton because he wanted to create a program to mobilize the next generation of young people, right? And he was like, how do we, on a global level, because we've been doing it progressively, we've been doing it for the progressive left here in the US, but he was like, how do we tap into this global space? And I feel like that ended up bringing me back because I had gone to Ireland, right? I had gotten this global insight. So I felt like I was the right person for that. And other people saw that. My bosses were like, look, if you're going to do this, you're going to get Keisha to come and build it for you. And I really think that it was because of what I did with Ireland. And so I didn't know why I wanted to go. I wanted to go to Ireland because I'd never been. There was a lot of other places I've never been. But I was like, yo, I want to go to Ireland. I've never been. And and because I said yes there, it proved to be necessary for something that I needed to do in the future. And I just had to trust. I had to just trust that. I totally agree with you as it relates to um saying yes, and being ready for being present in that moment, and ready and able for whatever that assignment is, and trusting that you have what it takes to be able to execute it, to deliver, and to give whatever your gift is in that moment. That's my prayer. And that's what I end up
Yeah.
hoping and believing that I'm gonna be able to contribute.
Yeah. Having something to contribute is actually very powerful to me.
Mhm.
Like the acknowledgement that you have something to contribute is like super huge because I think a lot of folks, when we're activated, we realize that. But you started talking about, like, do I really want to think about solutions right now? Like, is that something I really want to be responsible for? Which is a very valid thing to feel right now. But I'm also thinking about courage because you
Mm,
mentioned the fear associated with this stuff, and there's always fear. There's I think I'm a person who I don't necessarily want to eradicate doubt because I think that's a human impulse, and I think it's like a natural human impulse. But courage is so important because that's where the faith kicks in. Because it's
mhm,
not like fearless. You're not like in fearless. It's just a matter of doing it anyway, right? Like you said, you still gonna go, still gonna do it. And then you mentioned, then it's like this piece about what I call unique qualification, right? Where
mhm.
it's like you sounded like you were uniquely qualified in these moments to be the person to be able to switch and say yes over here or go over here or I'm gonna do this because I want to, but then these other doors open up. So that's really powerful. Uh, your journey and the way that you've been able to show up. And I kind of even want to hear more about this piece about uh, what do you have to contribute, because I think that underlines a
Right.
lot of the a lot of the work that a lot of us do. Right, so many of us feel called to give back or called to contribute something, and I'm curious as to one where that came from, and you know, you've inhabited a lot of spaces and you've contributed to so many different spaces. So I'm curious as to how the spaces you've been in have shaped,
Mm.
you know, the things you've contributed or the way that you've been able to look in the mirror and say, I can contribute this in this space. Or if you may not even thought about it like that. You may have just been like moving and shaking and flowing. But I'm curious about that, like in terms of the spaces you've inhabited and having things to contribute and being uniquely qualified in those spaces.
You know, I love the way you're so good at this. It's so easy to talk to you because you pick out nuggets of a conversation and I have to there you have to think about them even more and hear yourself what and then really delve into what that means. And I love that. Thank you. That's making me think about that even more. So I fundamentally believe that we have something to contribute, especially if we are black, if we are black and we are in that space.
Word,
And I say
word.
that as a person who so many times throughout my career I have been the only, and I know I am no different than the people who are listening to your podcast. We have all shown up where we are somewhat of the only. And sometimes I have been the only Black person at the table. I have either been the only woman at the table, no matter if I'm Black or white, or I have been the only young person at the table. And a good number of time, I have been the only young Black woman at the table, right? I've been all of them. And because I am, there's sometimes you get frustrated that you're the only, but I also think that when I have those times in which I have been the only, I have something to contribute because no one else can speak to who I am and the journey in the communities in which I represent, right? And so to me, that becomes responsibility and power in those conversations to figure out what I need to say, how I need to contribute to it, and how I might need to shift um, this audience to understand, or whoever it is, my bosses at that time, my clients, the politicians that I'm talking to, whoever I need to shift to be able to understand a different perspective. In addition, the other thing that I will say that has been super important to me, if I am the only, it is fundamentally my my responsibility and my goal to make sure that I don't stay the only. Like how do I bring someone else to the table when I get the opportunity to? How do I bring in more voices to the table, be it hiring more people to bring in, or if I'm consulting and I'm bringing in clients, I want to know, well, here's another expert that we need to talk to so you can be able to understand the vast perspective, because we're not monolithic in who we are and what we do. And so let's understand as many different arrays and opportunities. So I mean, it has that is to me the responsibility when you are the only, and the what you can bring to the table, what you have to contribute, because you're so different, you're bringing value to that. Even if you are young and being at the table and trying to figure out how to use your voice and how you contribute can fundamentally make a difference. And I say that because I remember when I was at the head of one of my programs that I was leading, and so we had this artist that was supposed to come. And so I don't know if people remember this. Most people might have been in school, but there was the volcano in Iceland that erupted, and it messed up flights for everyone. Like, it was probably, I don't remember what year it was. It was probably somewhere like 2009, 2010 or something. And everyone was messed up. People couldn't get anywhere. Flights were grounded. People were stuck in Europe. It was just completely. And so one of our artists at that time, Usher, he couldn't make it. He was coming to speak to a whole bunch of kids in Miami, and he couldn't make it, and because flights were grounded. So I'm thinking, because we just know this. I was like, yo, for real, lives in Miami. And so I was like, Pharrell lives in Miami. Maybe we can get Pharrell to take Usher's place, because we got, in probably what, 5 hours, we have thousands of young people in the audience at University of Miami that are waiting to hear from President Clinton and Usher and Paul Farmer. Paul Farmer couldn't make it either, whatever. So all these people. And so my boss at the time, and I think he'll be okay with me telling this story because he actually tells it sometimes too. He was like, "No, we have Jimmy Buffett, because Margaritaville, and we're in Miami, and Margaritaville is, am I right? That's Jimmy Buffett, right?" Yeah. So I was like, Jimmy Buffett is great, but I don't think he's the right replacement for Usher Raymond. That's not necessarily going to resonate with this target audience. So I'm sitting here, and it's me again. I'm literally the only Black woman in this, Black person in this room, with 4 or 5 different, I love them to this day, but like 4 or 5 different white men that are all over the age of, I'm gonna say probably 45, 50 at this time, maybe
Right.
50 at the time.
Yeah.
And then my staff, and my staff was younger, but they were white as well too. But so it's just me. I'm only again. This is a moment where I'm only, and I know I got something to contribute because I got culture to contribute to this conversation. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, people are gonna be upset if Margaritaville, and no, we love Margaritaville. It's so much fun, but it's not the great replacement for this. So I keep going back. So I'm smart. I'm thinking ahead. I get my team to put together a whole one pager on Pharrell, like who he is, because I knew they did not know who he was. And this is before Happy. So this is all of us who just knew who Pharrell was. This is before it became, Happy took off, and now he's everyone, all other people know him. Put together this one thing. He was doing so much stuff on his clothing line, and how he was really responsible and making sure that the clothes that he was from recycled products. Like, I just knew all this stuff about Pharrell. Plus, I just knew his music. It was great. And so all of that. And so I bring it to my boss. I'm like, hey, this is who I think we should do. This is who I think we should get. I actually even got the president's office from Miami to say Margaritaville wouldn't be the right person for for our audience. And he still said, at that time, he was like, no. He was like, no, I don't know who Pharrell is. I really think it's Jimmy Buffett. So then he said, you know what? I'm gonna call my 14-year-old. He called his 14-year-old daughter. So there's a moment, like, you're the director, you're the leader of this program. They hired you to hear your voice and to hear your expertise, but then you get on the phone and call a 14-year-old child
Oh
just
man.
to to validate what your senior director is telling you is the right thing, and that I've set up, because I've also called on the side to make sure I can get a yes from Pharrell. Like, I've set this all up. Like, I'm strategic. I was just, all I need you to understand is say yes, because the balls are in motion, right? So as soon as he calls his daughter, and she was like, do you know Pharrell? She starts screaming. Like, the child, I hear that everyone hears this child going crazy. And so also realize the 14-year-old child is not the target audience, because we're talking about college students too. So, whatever. Here we are. And so then he was like, okay, I guess we'll do it. He comes, God bless, let me tell you, Pharrell is absolutely fantastic. This man comes on the last minute to say, yeah, I will come up. I'll talk to college students. This is Miami. I wouldn't mind talking to President Clinton. He comes, he has on these dope red sneakers, and President Clinton and Pharrell are ecstatic. I mean, it is the one most electrifying conversations. And even before that, I had to go out and tell this audience of students, like, hey, I'm so glad to have you. Unfortunately, Usher Raymond couldn't make it because of the flight. I mean, the boos. I've never been booed in my, you ain't been booed until you've been booed by 2,000 college students. And so they boo me. And then I was like, but I was like, that's okay, but guess what? I got Pharrell Williams. And I mean, they jumped out of their seats. And so now my boss is looking like, oh, well, other people know who this Pharrell is. I'm like, dude. So comes out President Clinton and Pharrell. I mean, they rock it. He's funny. And I mean, the fact that Pharrell did this within an hour, I still would continue to say thank you if I see him again. He did this in an hour, rocked it. And then now to this day, bring the story full circle. My boss in his office got a picture of him and Pharrell like this. I was like, now Pharrell, his best friend, my old boss. I mean, this was years ago. But, like, it's that moment of knowing that I had something to contribute. And I knew my audience, I knew my culture, I knew who Usher is, and I knew who Pharrell could be, with like where that could be, and having the ability to be like, no, this isn't right. But that took a lot, and I was young, I was super scared, but I stepped into that fear, and I fought that. And it turned out, to this day, this man still loves to tell the story about how Keisha introduced me to Pharrell, and he got this framed picture. I mean, the picture's so big, it's absurd. I didn't even get a picture with Pharrell.
This is a great story. This is a fantastic story. Especially in light of, telling us how you are uniquely qualified and how that works out. That's a great story. You should tell that often. That's got to be your number one story.
I keep forgetting about it. I always forget until I see him. Like, we randomly see each other, and he was like, you remember that Pharrell story? I'm like, I sure do, and I bet we remember it differently.
Oh man. Yeah, he's best friends with Pharrell. That's great.
Now they're best friends. Story. This is one of his favorite. It's like all his framed pictures of presidents and Pharrell. Because I mean, fast forward, Pharrell, I feel like this was before Happy, and then of course, how took global. But I'm like, no, to stand in that and know that it was going to be a success, and know your audience, and know why you're there. Like, if you are in the room, you definitely got something to contribute. What is it? How can you speak to that? How can you stand in it, even when it's kind of scary? Like, am I going to lose my job? Like, what's going to happen?
Yeah, even when it's scary, how do you speak to it? How do you stand in it? You mentioned being the only, and I think you're right. A lot of our listeners, I know I experienced this, right? Like, have been the only in the rooms. And there was something that an advisor in undergrad told me, actually, that stuck with me. And, I think of myself as always being oriented towards liberation in some ways. And I think a lot of us do, especially thinking communally as well as individually. And advisor told me, freedom's twin is responsibility.
Ooh, I'm gonna write that one down.
Yeah. Freedom's twin is responsibility. And, a couple years later, I had an advisor in grad school say to me, or it was a question, she posed a question to a group of us. And it was a very, thought-provoking question I still sit with, right? Which is like, you have to recognize that when you're a college graduate, when you enter the world in this way, especially coming from schools that we maybe have come from, we have power. And it's important to recognize that. And she just asked a simple question: what are you going to do with your power? It's not a question of if you're gonna have power or if you're gonna have access to it, but the question is, what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to be responsible with it? What rooms are you going to be in? What conversations are you going to interrupt? What spaces are you going to inhabit? And the story you just told, and even just the way you moved, is super key to that, right? And that responsibility and power piece is a thing that I think a lot of us work through. A lot of us work through over the course of a journey, right? It's not. I don't know we ever get to an answer for it, but it's definitely something that is just in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a matter of like also evaluating when to not be responsible for stuff too, right? Right, like I'm still on where you started our conversation, which is like I've just been going back and forth about how overwhelming this stuff is, how overwhelming it is to be a person who's responsible for thinking about solutions or how to fix it. And a lot of folks I'll be around just like, listen, this is on white people this time. Y'all got to fix this. This ain't my responsibility. This is on somebody else. But I'm like, especially considering the story you just told me and told us, and what I know about where you are. I'm curious about where are you in the journey of taking up spaces, right? Because there's been an evolution. Like, has there actually been an evolution in the spaces you've seen? Like, is your responsibility still, like, how high are you on the responsibility piece, and like how the spaces responded to that, right? I mean, we know that your old boss is not best friends with Pharrell, but I'm curious as to like how spaces have responded or evolved and where we are in that.
I think it's a little too early to tell
Mm,
for me, right? So on the light of like what has happened, and let's just do in the last year and a half. Right now we're a year and a quarter two since 2020. I think 2020 shift. I do believe it shifted. It shifted some people and it shifted some organizations. I mean, we saw globally organizations, industries step up and say and either say something, make a statement, um, shift money, shifting power. We are seeing, I mean, for on the highest level, we're seeing what has happened in our election, and we see we finally have a black person in black woman in the White House, in that part, and breaking that ceiling. And we're also seeing other CEOs and women being able to be the first as it relates to Walgreens. Different things. We are seeing that investments to a certain degree, right? We're seeing foundations shift money to be able to center and put and invest money in racial justice and to social justice. We're seeing those things happen. So I think we got to play the long game with that. So, like, if everyone stepped up and everyone is saying something, then I think we hold them to this moment. And I've been telling people like this: if we are in this moment, activate in this moment. What is it that you want to launch? What is it that you want to do? Where is it that you want to tell and bring some truth to what's happening in your company that you think needs to be shifted? I have friends on a personal level. It's like, this company, I'm finally seeing that it is not aligned with a value of centering and caring for me as a person of color and what I bring to the table. And I'm going to step out, and if you have the ability to be able to do it, and find some other company. So that's even on a personal level. And I've been having conversations um, in the space as relates to finance and how we're looking at capital, having spaces that relates in the entertainment industry, been having these conversations that relates to corporations and philanthropy. I do hear people saying, how do we center people of color? How do we center culture? And how do we center people of color? How do we start making investment? Now, we need to see what that looks like. We need to see actually, how are you doing that? Are you bringing people of color in to help run organizations? Are you investing in black owned businesses? Are you centering that? And so, in order to continue to see that shift, like right now, I see a lot of people having these conversations, and I do fundamentally see money being moved to do that, and voices being centered and elevated and given positions. What's the long game? So we're only, for me, we're only, what, this is April. We're only in April from when this stuff has been happening to this degree over the last year. I want to see who's still standing.
mm,
I want to see who's still standing. I want to see who is still putting their investments there. I want to see what companies are still hiring and diversifying their leadership. Who is hiring Black people? People are out here. They are talented. I want to see how philanthropy is really shifting. That we're not all individuals sitting in a room trying to identify how to fix, and I'm air quoting, fix issues on the ground, but there's no one at the table can speak to that community, no one at that table who comes from those experiences. How are we continuing to shift that? So it's a lot of talk, it's a lot of investment, and I think it's really great. I'm glad to see money moving and people getting opportunities, but I do want to still see who's standing, who's still here when the conversation shifts, who is calling and making accountable and saying, which I really do appreciate these businesses that came out. I believe it was the New York Times last week or the week before, of we want to protect the Black vote. We need to stop suppressing. Like, who was calling it and naming it, and then also calling and naming where we see that we need to shift policies that are rooted in racism, policies and decisions that are rooted in old, outdated approaches that show up today that tend to be harmful to Black and brown people, that keep Black and brown people outside of the conversation. So all of that to say, yes, I do think I see an evolution, and I think it's beyond time. But let's see who is still in it for the long game, and let's see who's in here in it to really put money and capital and resources towards what they are saying publicly and what they're doing.
Yeah. Sounds like folks need to stay vigilant and keep that same energy. That's what I'm hearing.
I think you just need to stay and keep people accountable. Like, keep people accountable, keep your companies accountable, keep your organizations accountable, keep your clients accountable. When I stepped out after I moved to Los Angeles, and I used to be the vice president for Will and Jada Smith's Family Foundation, at points before I would take clients, I would have conversations on, you want me to build these impact programs externally, but what are you doing internally? Because if I build something externally, the authenticity does not match up. How do your Black and brown people feel as a place to work? How are you investing in them? And so if you're not investing in your Black and brown people internally, what's the use of me externally creating something that shows an investment for a community? There has to be some sort of alignment there. And I believe that. And I believe that even as entrepreneurs, as people, we have to ask these questions of companies and help them keep accountable. And then also, in some space, give grace. Like, change doesn't happen overnight. It's not a light switch. So what do you do, and what are you putting in place to be able to push that change forward and to drive that change forward? And I don't think that, to your point, what you said earlier, this is white people's problem to solve. Some stuff they need to have these conversations within themselves. Correct, right? But if there is an investment in my community and my people, I want to be at the table to have that conversation, to give you insight, and to let you know this is what is needed. This is how it needs to be done differently. And I don't mind being at the table to help you shift and understand how better, and I say help, for you to be able to pay me to do that, to be able to work with me, to be able to do that, to help hire you to do that. And I say me, meaning all of us, to be able to be at that table to understand how we can make change. And that's something that I think that if it's right, if it's comfortable, if you feel safe, those are places that we can step in and step up.
Yeah. That sounds like it's going back to that responsibility and power piece, right? Like the stepping up and, and filling in the role. I do want to mention that the person who told me about the responsibility, the twinship between responsibility and freedom, was Dr. Ed Joyner. I want to say these people's names. Dr. Ed Joyner and Professor Diana Swancutt is the person who said to me, "What are you going to do with your power?" Right. I just want to throw those names out there because I think it's important to. We do a lot of name sharing. We do a lot of
Mhm.
name calling, and it's important to call on the names of folks who not only have become ancestors, sometimes too soon, but also the folks who have inspired us and who are still in the land of living. So I just wanted to do that real quick. And what you said is spot on, right? I mean, we definitely got to step up and be responsible with the power that we've been given, and especially because we have things to contribute.
I am so fundamentally proud of us. Like, if I could just give us a big hug, I would. I'm so proud of us. I'm so
Mm,
proud of how we are creating. Like, we're just so absolute. The what we're creating, the organizations that we're creating, the communities that we are creating. I say keep our feet, foot to the gas, to the pedal with that, and speaking up and having voice. Just even I always answer the phone of someone who wants, if they want to talk internally, like how to have a conversation internally, what to do. And to your point, being in that collective community where someone can come to us and be like, look, this is what we're thinking about doing in our organization. What have you seen? Or this is how I want to have this conversation. Like, just being part of that, because we are now in so many different parts of industry. Even your friend, we have mutual friends, and we talk about, what can we do to keep people accountable, to keep our companies accountable, keep our organizations accountable. So I really want to just champion the fact that the way that we are stepping up. I am so proud of us, and we just have to keep doing that, because unf- unfortunately, I think the fight is not done, right? I think that I want these to be the last. I don't want to see another hashtag. I don't want to see another person that becomes victim, their families become victim to something that was beyond their control, and to harm. But there's a likelihood that it will be, right? And so we have to continue to, I think, fight. I think we have to continue to have our voice. We have to continue to contribute, like we said earlier, and use our power, because it's it's a journey that we're on. And
mm,
I fundamentally believe that our voices are some of the loudest that they have been able to be in such a long time, because we are in positions of power, because we are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors, because we are planning for our future. I'm really so proud of all that we're doing and how we're holding people accountable right now in this moment.
yeah. I know you was gonna come in here and preach, Keisha. You
I'm
come
so
you over here preaching. I'm sitting to move and spirits on me. Hold up now. Hold on. Hold on. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm saying that you're proud of us. That's powerful. And I'm proud of us with you, and to be in community and to be in the creative community. You mentioned folks creating and being such creators, and it's in 100. It's 100% fact. And you've been in creative spaces your whole journey. You're obviously now you're in a maybe more directly creative space, but like you said earlier, right? You've been kind of doing documentaries or being a part of these different organizations that have utilized creation or creative people as part of their mission. I'm curious about your vision for
Mhm,
creators or entertainment's role in addressing social solutions, how art is a tool. I mean, we know it is a tool, but like, and you only been a monkey paw a few months, but again, you've been doing this. This is not new to you. So I'm
mhm,
curious about what your vision is, what your hope is, what you're excited about for what role entertainment, music, movies,
mhm,
film, documentaries can play in this work that you, like you noted,
mhm,
the journey is here and we're on it. But what
mhm.
role is that going to play?
I'm really excited, even with the entertainment space, to be somewhat, like you said, new in the space in the last 4 years, where my feet are firmly planted. I've straddled so many different industries, and it's built a tapestry. But now here, firmly planted and creating myself too. There's a couple things that I'm creating and working on. I really do believe that there's so much responsibility, right? We have such a big responsibility in the entertainment industry, because of what we create and how we are able to mobilize people, and how we're able to touch people through story, right? Story is just so powerful. I mean, story, it's oral history. Story, we've been telling stories for as long as there's been humans, and we've been alive, right? We've been telling stories. And so now, the power that Hollywood has, and the images that we are seeing, and the stories that we are telling, I'm excited to be doing the work that I'm doing as it relates to bringing impact to the table, because a lot of these stories are talking about issues, or they're highlighting issues, or they're showing us the humanity and what people are going through and the experiences that people are going through. And so I believe in a really entertaining way, or if you're monkey paw, sometimes in a sci-fi thrilling type of way, that we can arm our audiences with tools, and we can arm our audiences with introducing them. So just like how you said, how you're naming people that are doing the work, or are pouring into you. I fundamentally believe that as we tell these stories and we talk about issues, if we retell someone's life, that we can arm them with solutions, and we can arm them with tools and individuals that are actually doing the work on the ground. And that way we're still elevating, we're elevating our community, we're elevating the people who are either addressing head on the issues that we're working on and that we see, whether it's recidivism, whether it is working around mental health and our black and brown community, whether it's working around healing and liberation, then and investing in black women. And you just all these great stories that we're telling, that I've seen told. How can we point our audiences to continue to either learn, to continue the conversation after the credits come up? How can we arm them with what we need to be able to do, to be able, if they want to act, if they've watched something and you're moved, like after you leave, I don't know how many times I back in the day, oh, can we just say a moment for coming out of a movie theater, just have a moment for the movie
Oh, oh,
theater.
moment of silence for coming out of the movie
That's
theater.
what-
Wow,
okay.
it's been a long time since we've done. Oh man.
It's been a lot, right? And I just remember coming out of the theater with my friends, and we would just sit outside sometimes and like going back and forth of what we just watched, right? So like those things are gonna happen. So how can we give audiences, point them to people that are doing that work, or get them, they might want to donate. They might feel something, they want to continue in those conversations. They might have been affected by that and they need resources to be able to deal with that themselves, right? And so I just think that that's just so powerful. And I'm excited to be able to do that. I'm excited to be able to look at the content and then see that we're telling stories, and it might be real, it might not be real, but it does affect, it has the ability. There's some themes in there that are real, that we have to face every single day. And so how do we just have the responsibility? Like, I feel like that is my responsibility as a storyteller, to help my audience digest and deal with and feel what they're watching, and to give them something that can activate them afterwards.
Yeah. I love how excited you just got. There's clearly it's a blessing to be so excited about the work you do. You know what I'm saying? And you are clearly inspired by your work you're doing. It's impactful, literally impactful.
Hmm.
And thank you for the work you're doing. I want to say thank you. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the work you're doing. As you mentioned before, just
Yeah.
being proud of us and naming that. But you're excited right now. Clearly, you got a little joy.
Oh,
You got a
I
little
got a
joy.
little excited, I got a little hype for a
Got a
second.
little joy. Now that's important. I wanted to follow up that moment with just asking you about how else you're experiencing joy these days.
That is, I love this question. Ooh, how are we experiencing joy?
Mm,
It's good to be reminded of that, especially through everything that we're going through. I had a moment last night where, and I'll just speak in the moment, because I was out and I had a friend that I haven't seen in a while, and she's traveling in, and we met on a roof, and we had good food and wine without, we're on the roof, so we didn't have our mask on, and we were in our little corner, and then we had drinks and good food, and I was like, it just felt normal. It felt normal for that moment. And I was just so happy, just catching up, because, I've been kind of in isolation and just working, and, you're not really around people that much. I mean, like you started this conversation, that we do feel like we're getting back to some sense of normalcy, but we're both vaccinated, and we just had this moment where we sat on the roof and had drinks and talked and looked at beautiful Los Angeles. And that was joy. That was my joy for that. I mean, it almost felt like I had like 2019 vibes. It was just, it just felt good.
Remember
And
2019? Whoa, I'm like, wait a second, 2019. Gosh, but yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry. Please
that
continue.
felt
That's
exact. No, that felt good. And then I think my other joy always is like, I'm a I'm a candle junkie, and so any moment of the before we even got on here, I sat and I did a meditation. I put my candles, I did my incense, and I have my diffuser and my oils going. And just that moment gives me joy, and it just brings me back to center. And I am trying to be more intentional with that because this world is so busy that it feels as if there's no escape for it some time. And to be able just to find those little things that ground me is they make me happy. They bring me joy. And then lastly, and I love it that now it gets to be my job. Like I'm gonna lay on the sofa and just binge something and just go and just be excited about that. That I'm just on the sofa enjoying it. And those things bring me. I love good content. I love a good story. I love talking about stories and and entertainment. And so that those things just really, those are my three things that I think are bringing me joy right now.
That's good. That's real good. Sometimes it's the little things or the things we don't always think about. It's important to stay present with them. So I'm glad you were able to share that with me and with us. And thank you for popping in and jumping on the line with me to have this conversation. I I've been breathing this whole time, and I've been finding joy in our conversation. So thank you for bringing that energy, and hopefully for the listeners who've tuned in, you've been able to experience a similar thing. Is there anything else you want to say to the people? I it's basketball season right now, and the first time we talked, I learned that you were a fan of the Sixers growing up, and it's a story I really want you to share, but I don't know if you want to share it because it's
Yes,
so
the
hilarious.
Suns. I was a Suns girl.
Oh,
I
you
was
were
a Phoenix,
Suns. That's right.
the Phoenix Suns.
It was the
Yes. Now you know
Suns.
what, and we have to give a shout out to my dog Barkley. He's quiet in the background. He hasn't said anything, so I'm really proud of him throughout this whole podcast. He just wanted to show y'all some love. But yes, so we did talk about this. I was a Phoenix Suns fan when I was a child too. Probably a questionable degree. I loved Charles Barkley when I was a kid with all my heart. And it was it you? Someone was like, I find it really strange to hear a kid that loved Charles Barkley that much. I was like, yeah, that was me.
Well, no,
And
I
I mean,
think I said that because usually in the '90s you hear Jordan. Everybody was a Jordan fan in the '90s, so they hear like people would respect Charles Barkley. They would say like, "Oh yeah, he's
I
good,"
would go
but
to bat for him. Yeah, it was strange. I mean, like he was my it was Jordan and Walt and wait a minute, not Jordan, sorry. It was Charles Barkley and Tupac and randomly Tyson Beckford that were like my wallpaper when I was a kid. It was like maybe one Tyson Beckford. I don't understand what that was. Maybe it was,
sounds
I don't know.
it's very '90s. That's
It's so,
very
I mean, it was so 90s. I used to take the magazine and hang it up, but I had so many Charles Barkley posters. And I used to wear Phoenix Suns. I had a Phoenix Suns starter jacket, that went over your head and you had your pocket, the little pouch. That one, this Phoenix Suns, along with his jersey. And I used to wear hair bows. So I had Phoenix Suns hair bows and I had his shoes. And I had the swish swish pants, the pants you when you walk, and I would put them all on at the same time. And I'd wear this outfit maybe more than once a week.
Do you have a picture of this? Is there
I
photographic
wish I
evidence?
did. There needs to be evidence of this. I'm sure there is. I'm really, really, really sure there was some evidence. But I mean, this is how much I love Charles Barkley, and it was crazy. And so one day I was working in Atlanta, and I was working for one of my clients, and I just happened. There was this nail shop on Piedmont that I love, and if you all live in Atlanta, there's this nail shop on Piedmont. I forget the name of it, but they're absolutely great. And I just happened to go there in between meetings. It's the middle of the day, and you're right. It was at that time. It was during basketball season as well too. So I walk in, and there's no one in the shop. Like there's no one. It's like maybe like 11 o'clock or something, and the women take me in, and they take me all the way to the back with this where there's this man, and I said, well, why would they take me all the way? Like there's it's that thing like, why are you putting me in the back? There's all these empty seats. That little voice in the back of our brain gets starts like, well, why do I gotta be in the back? But then I start walking to the back with them and I'm like, is that? And they sit me right next to him. So then I'm like, oh my God, it's Charles Barkley. So then I'm having an entire like meltdown inside of me. So, I sit down and he's like, hey baby, how you doing? I mean, just so sweet. And I was like, hi sir, how are you doing? So I sit there and I'm like trying my best not to freak out. And he's getting a pedicure. And then I start getting a pedicure. then we start, then he looks over, he's like, how's your day? And I was like, oh, I'm great. How was your day? So then something had just happened. They did Inside the NBA the night before. And so they were talking. And so, of course, I stayed up and watched it. And so I was watching. So I was so proud that I was like, oh my God, what did you think about, what happened with KD? And I just remember we were talking about KD. And so we go back and forth. And I'm just so hyped. So meanwhile, I'm still texting my family like, oh my God, I'm getting my toes done with Charles Barkley. I'm having a pedicure with Charles Barkley. And so my family was like, if you do not ask for a picture, I know you never ask for pictures. This is not you, but you better ask for a picture because the level of your obsession with Charles Barkley was like, we were worried about you. I was like, no, I'm not going to ask for a picture. So I never asked for a picture, but we sat there and we talked about basketball. Then I had to tell him how I used to wear all his paraphernalia at one time and multiple times in the week. And he was like, oh, this is so sweet. Then he kept, which is the cute thing if you watch Inside, Charles Barkley, he falls asleep. So he kept falling asleep in the middle of our conversations. And I'm like, oh my God, he's falling asleep. It's actually happening, what they do. And then he would pop up and look at me like, and like almost like, did I record him? Like, no, this is not, like, I'm not that person. I'm just happy that we're getting our toes done and you keep falling asleep and we're talking basketball and like I can die a happy woman. So fast forward, I named my dog Barkley. Shout out to one of my best friends, Chandra, who was like, why don't you name your dog Barkley? And I was like, that's a perfect name. So
It's a great story. You got great stories. It makes sense that you work for such a, you're currently at a really great storytelling organization, but production company. You got great stories. Thank you for blessing us with these stories.
thank you for having me. And thank you for doing this. You are providing us a service. I love listening to your podcast. I love listening to you and what you're doing. So thank you for contributing to keeping us
Thank you.
all informed and
Thank you.
uplifted. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And to all listeners, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate y'all too. And until next time, Keisha, thank you again.
Thank you.
Peace and power.
True.